now. Thank you for your patience, everybody. To my super chat, greatly appreciated. Let's get started. CBS News, Slate, Time Magazine, other publications as well. Judge delays sentencing in New York and Trump's New York criminal case. Slate, judge had a surprisingly good reason to delay Trump's sentencing. Time Magazine, now you have Time and others. Trump promises to jail adversaries. So now the tables have turned. They couldn't imprison Trump, so now they're accusing him of doing to them what they try. Now they're accusing Trump of trying to do to them what they've desperately tried to do to Trump, which is imprison him right before November. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. CBS News, Slate, Time Magazine, a whole bunch of publications are talking about how they can't jail Trump. Why? Because the Supreme Court has essentially overturned, and hit subscribe. We're going to get into this right now. They've overturned over 85, 90 plus criminal charges against Trump with the immunity victory, with the victory overturning the Colorado ban, with the victory reducing sentencing for January defendants. If you're going to bail out people in the summer, in Trump's last year in office, but then you want to give the most egregious sentences to people that terrible day. It was a terrible day in January. It was terrible. Should never happen again. But when chaos and mayhem is caused by left-leaning demonstrators, even if it's the underlying reason is a moral, is more of an ethical or moral concern than what took place in January, that's not justification to simply allow billions and billions of dollars in property damage, for example. Paul Bartlett, thank you to my super chat. Thank you. Let's get started. Hit subscribe. The Supreme Court has essentially completely obliterated the hush money criminal conviction. The Supreme Court ruling Navy versus Egan, other rulings. The Supreme Court has sided with Trump numerous occasions, but even precedent shows he has the power to declassify as a president. So the documents case is thrown out the window. So you have the immunity decision completely undermining not only the New York conviction, but also the special counsel. The special counsel was thrown out in terms of the documents case. So that's 3 cases right now. New York, D.C., Florida, all thrown out. Essentially, until way after November, basically, there's nothing there. If he had committed a crime, they would have already imprisoned the man. They were desperately trying to interfere, which is exactly what they accused Trump of doing. I mean, this is just basic logic. They're literally accusing Trump of what they impeached him of. Okay, they impeached him over a phone call. They're trying to imprison the man over nonsense. And we know it's nonsense because all of these cases have completely dismantled. Then the Georgia case. The prosecutors in the Georgia case had potential legal issues, and that helped cause the case to completely be dismantled. But hit subscribe. Let's get started. We'll first address the documents case, classified data, which the Supreme Court has already stated a president like Trump has the power to declassify. Also, the special counsel was illegally created.
News alert now. We have major breaking news on one of the cases facing the former president, Donald Trump. Specifically, the documents case based out of Palm Beach, Florida. For more on that, David Spun tracking it in Washington, D.C. And David, I'll allow you to deliver this major headline.
Judge Eileen Cannon has dismissed the classified documents case against Donald Trump in Florida. This is massive news. We did not see this coming at all. This is a case that she tentatively postponed to a later date. The original trial was set for the end of May. She moved it back a couple of months, though not setting a date. She has just dismissed it in a 93-page court document saying that Jack Smith, the special counsel's appointment, violates the appropriations clause and the appointments clause of the United States Constitution. In layman's terms, she's saying that he was not appointed lawfully and not appointed appropriately. I'm sure we're going to be hearing from the Department of Justice about this momentarily as Attorney General Merrick Garland Garland believes that he had every right, and his team believes every right, that he could appoint Jack Smith as special counsel. We're going through this right now. It's 93 pages. The printer is cranking up behind me, page by page. But essentially, the bottom line here is that this documents case goes completely away for Donald Trump. There was a hearing that was originally scheduled for next week to talk more about this appointments issue. Judge Cannon issues this on the day of the beginning of the RNC. So right now, Donald Trump still has one pending case against him in federal court that's here in.
They also, according to reports, the top secret pages on there, they actually added that for the photo up, according to media reports. So I'll just add, according to media reports, but the evidence was literally tampered with. Okay? They still couldn't find anything. You think that when the Republican establishment, the entire Democratic Party, the existing structure of government all wants Trump gone, and he's still on his way to winning. You think maybe if he was actually guilty of something, they would have imprisoned him a long, long time ago? The man is probably the cleanest politician we've ever had. I mean, you know, in modern history, okay? The man has been investigated more so. They say the Clintons were investigated, but they've... You can look back at Whitewater. You can look back at, like, he lied under oath. These are things that, very bizarre occurrences. I mean, the foundations, like, well, what Hunter and Joe did, possibly worse. I mean, the obvious graft and bribery schemes, people are giving donations or they're giving money for a reason, for influence. But with Trump, it's like, you know, Clinton had private servers. Trump, he had documents. He didn't have private. You think if Trump had private servers, the Honorable James Comey would say, well, no reasonable prosecutor would indict. They would have. If he deleted 30,000 emails, if Trump had 30,000 deleted emails, it would be the life mission of every good, morally superior liberal to find those documents. They wouldn't say, oh, it's about, golf, And so, I mean, he was a president with the power to declassify. Every single president before Trump has done the similar things, or at least the exact same things. Okay. The Bush administration also had a server with like millions of emails deleted. So it's like both sides of the aisle get away with rampant possible criminality. With Trump, hey, you have documents. Yeah, he was a president. Look up Navy versus Egan, a Supreme Court precedent. Okay. He's allowed to declassify. Only the president can declassify material. Vice president can declassify some material. But Biden had material from when he was a senator. So, I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, if you're not into politics, and this is why the channel is growing, I'll do 2 live streams tomorrow. Did only 1 today. I'm going to do 3 starting the middle of October, all throughout November, December, January. Do 2 to 3 live streams a day easily. I like to do the live streams as opposed to the uploads. It's just a lot easier from an algorithmic perspective. Whatever, if you watch the channel, you understand what that means. Let's continue.
Court that's here in Washington, D.C. That's his alleged attempts to try to overturn the 2020 election. Special counsel Jack Smith received a blow to that case just a couple of weeks ago with the Supreme Court. That seems to be somewhat delayed right now. But this is big news. No question that this case is completely dismissed. Bill?
What's interesting is that, David, you said that's a 93-page ruling. I'm kind of curious as to why it would take so many pages, because if based on what you're saying is she's not ruling on the merits of the case. She's ruling that the special counsel should never have been appointed. And then I wonder about the how that will reverberate throughout the Department of Justice, because does that mean that other situations like this would also be dismissed?
It's a great question, and we're waiting to get some clarity from DOJ. I'm just reading here on page 2 of 93. It says the Appointments Clause sets as a default rule that all officers of the United States, whether inferior or principal, must be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Jack Smith was not confirmed by the Senate. I assume Dana and Bill will hear an argument from DOJ that past special counsels, John Durham, Robert Mueller, just to name a few in recent memory, also were not confirmed in that way and were appointed and were allowed to continue their work. So that's what we're probably going to hear from DOJ. But a major.
They raided Mar-a-Lago. Everyone around Trump was indicted over. The people indicted in the Mueller probe had literally nothing to do with the Kremlin. It was processed crimes. They forgot about an email they sent. Oh, you lied. The big photo op at Mar-a-Lago. The January committee, let's not get started on that. You just look at everything they did to this man. And you just be here on this channel November 5th when we find out the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th that Trump, and the 10th and 11th and 12th and 13th that Trump finally won. 14, 15, 16, 17. Finally, we'll find out that he wins. It's democracy. What's that? Another Office Depot box? And he'll still win. But anyway, let's continue.
Coup and major win for former President Trump, who comes off this last weekend.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley.
And then we're going to get into, that's a documents case. You know what? We'll do one case at a time. Documents case was Florida. And I might do this type of segment every single day. The reason, ladies and gentlemen, it is important to be very algorithmically friendly, and especially in terms of guidelines and protocol, because Trump is going to win. And that means we have to work with robots and algorithms and, programs. And so we'll enjoy ourselves on this channel. We'll do I'll give a great analysis like I hopefully usually do. When you see the Supreme Court live stream, or I focus on the Supreme Court and the stock market, and you say, well, he talked about this the other day and every single day. It's like, this is actually a theme that has catapulted Trump into the Oval Office again, the Supreme Court and the stock market. And they're very, very important themes. And for a number of other reasons, I'm going to focus on them every live stream.
All right, let's talk about Nathan Wade, because it's been a while since we found out about the guy that was asked to recuse himself, or Fonnie Willis was going to recuse herself of the case on this state case, this Fulton County case.
He was the ex-Fulton County prosecutor. He had his first sit-down interview since all of that unfolded. Watch this.
Workplace romances are as American as apple pie. It happens to everyone. But it happened to the two of us. You don't plan to develop feelings. You don't plan to fall in love. You don't plan to have some relationship in the workplace. That you don't set out to do that. And those things develop organically. They develop over time. And the minute we had that sobering moment, we discontinued it.
Do you think that you've done any kind of damage to this case?
None at all.
Even the public perception of it?
There again, this takes me back to the initial statement that I made. My private life became the focal point of the case. And my private life has nothing to do with the merits of that prosecution.
But his poor judgment has everything to do with how poorly the prosecution is going. And it makes you wonder on the fundamentals of the case, is this about fame? Is this about getting under the national spotlight? His salary was too large. His expenses were too large. She's been examined. Now they're running against her in her own party. They're looking at her expense budget. I think she got an extra $1 million in miscellaneous.
And you made a good point a minute ago asking Kerry about whether or not all this goes away if Trump wins the election. I wonder, even if he doesn't win the election, if all this stuff doesn't wind up going away, because it's so obviously politically motivated.
It just makes the profession look so bad. I mean, this is it appears to be so corrupt, non-professional. He's not even a lawyer that.
So there were issues there with payments. There were a whole bunch of issues with cash payments, a whole lot of things. So Florida, the special counsel, has been removed. The DC case, the immunity case, basically destroyed it, and they had to rewrite the indictment, and still we don't know in the indictment what's an official or unofficial act. He's protected for official acts. Official acts include, by the way, speaking to any Republican he wants to. Okay, any Republican, any Democrat, any advisor, any political official, any government official, anyone he wants to. It's an official act. They say, well, he's trying to convince and deceive and pressure people. Democratic politicians pressure people all the time. They're not indicted or imprisoned on that. And so, but they do so through media. They do so through a whole bunch of, I mean, we can go on forever. We can list examples, but that would take the whole live stream. Okay. You should, we could, I don't even want to bring it up. Anyway, there are actually Democratic politicians. You could look at what they did to Bernie Sanders, okay, in those emails. How they cheated Bernie Sanders, how they wanted to, they conspired against him. And he was actually running a primary. They don't even have a primary. They don't even have a functioning primary. So, but anyway, let's continue. So, the Florida case done. The special counsel was illegally created. The judge ruled that. Of course, when the judge rules something they don't like, oh my God, it's never good. Suddenly, the sanctity of a judge's ruling, not good. But if it hurts Trump, very good. It's the rule of law. So the Florida case, done. Georgia case, completely dismantled. Cash payments, all of that. Okay. Then you have the New York case. Oh, and the DC case, the immunity decision, completely dismantled it. Now you have the New York case, protected, number one, because of the immunity. He's allowed to speak to even Michael Cohen or Hope Hicks or, anyone he wants to speak to in his administration or a lawyer. And also, the immunity case protects him when he speaks to, jurisdiction. He does not, the state of New York cannot indict anyone. The state of New York cannot indict anyone if the federal government is not involved on federal charges. Any state can't indict on federal charges, can't convict on federal charges when, for example, the FEC, the Department of Justice, was not involved. They didn't level an indictment at Trump.
Trump's sentencing until November 26th, after the election. I'm curious, every step of the way throughout this trial, Judge Merchan has been, I would personally say, aggressive towards Donald Trump, not friendly to the defense. And then all of a sudden he's going to delay sentencing. I mean, from the outside, I'm looking at this going, what's the motivation? Clearly, every time Donald Trump's been indicted or they've gone after him, his poll numbers and fundraising have gone up. And Merchan has seemed very political. Was this a political calculation by Merchan?
I mean, it seems to me that he's in a pickle, right? Judge Merchan's in a pickle. What do? I sentence someone who's running right now, the forerunner. He will probably be elected president. I sentence him before he gets elected. When the Supreme Court came down with a case that pretty much invalidates the entire state court case, right, all of the evidence, How do you do that? So, of course, there's going to be an appeal. The Supreme Court already said the evidence you used in this case, Prosecutor Alvin Bragg, cannot be used against a former president.
They were so desperate to get Trump. They didn't realize that the Supreme Court would stop them. That's why I focus on the Supreme Court. Okay? It's perfectly follows guidelines, and it's perfectly suited and directly correlated to Trump's victory in November. That's why the wonderful, morally superior Democrats who care about democracy despise the Supreme Court, because it has helped Trump, because they've gone after him in the most unconstitutional manner.
Because of presidential immunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at then is a situation where Judge Merchan's probably saying, well, if I sentence him, that's not going to work. And if I wait, at least we'll see what's going to happen.
Right.
And, he'll probably, and anyone who read the Supreme Court decision should just reverse.
Yeah, it's a bad legal decision, which will probably be one on appeal at some level.
Sure.
I also think that Merchan's a political character, and and at some point you have to look at the political calculation as well. I think he did.
Yeah.
And go, wow, this will help Donald Trump if I sentence him.
Well,
probably. We'll never know at this point. But
yeah, we'll never know. But I mean, it certainly couldn't hurt Donald Trump, because it would be really obstruction of justice at this point. And it would really be election interference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
And I believe the court is getting sued as well by Trump's legal team.
So Judge Juan Merchan delaying former President Donald Trump's sentencing in his New York case until after the election, saying he wanted to avoid any suggestions that he would be giving either candidate an advantage or disadvantage. Of course not. Well,
and ladies and gentlemen, not to toot my own horn, but there are so many wonderful channels on YouTube. Who has told you consistently that the Supreme Court would consistently back Trump? Who has told you literally almost every single day for the past 5-6 months? I told you this, ladies and gentlemen, every day. Even before the Supreme Court decisions. How do you know? How on earth do you know H.A. Goodman? How do you know? Look at the title. How would you know that? It's right there. It's obvious. The Colorado ban told you it would be unanimous. You can't just decide that somebody committed a rebellion. He's not even indicted on that. Even the liberal justices, I said the liberal justices would side with Trump. They did. Then you have the immunity case that I talked about for a long time. You can't simply imprison a president because of a speech. Say that 30 times. You can't imprison a president because of a speech, because you think he's lying. How many times did Biden lie when he said he was going to stay in the contest? For 3 weeks, he said, I'm cornflakes, man. I'm not going anywhere, man. Yeah, man. And then they were like, oh, there was cheering. And you had like people calling up professors and media personalities. Oh, he's staying in the contest. Biden's not going anywhere. Did they all lie? Should they be indicted and imprisoned for lying? That's just one lie. We're not talking about a laptop full of bribery and graft. That 50 intel officials, the 50 intel officials, they said it was a plot by another country. Should they go to prison for lying? We can spend 5, 6, 7 hours on all the lies media and Democrats have told. The Steele dossier. Should people go to prison for purchasing the Steele dossier? Full of lies. Okay, so, but Trump told us he performed a speech, and that riled up people. And they didn't accept the loss, and they tried to foment a rebellion. This is like, you had a whole summer full of billions in property damage. I get it. I understand. I agree with why people peacefully demonstrated. I'm not equating the underlying morality or I'm not equating the underlying reasons as being equal for the two different, January and that summer. But when you're a Democratic Party and you're Kinzinger and Cheney and you don't shed any tears for the billions and 19 lives lost according to Wikipedia? 19 lives lost that summer. Billions in property damage, arson, all these things. Not one condemnation from Democrats. In fact, they were bailing out people who then committed more crimes in some cases. But it's like, It's like, the whole thing is unbelievable. Thank God when Trump becomes president again, the modern day Democratic Party must evolve the way the Republicans did with Trump. Although I don't know if they can because they don't have a Trump. They won't allow a Trump. They would cheat to ensure that the Democratic Party's version of a Trump doesn't ever win.
What does my next guest make of this move to former federal prosecutor Katie Cherkasky? Forgive the sarcasm on my part, but it's kind of, when you look at the way this judge dealt inside the courtroom, it's hard to suggest that he was completely impartial, isn't it?
Well, of course, there's no evidence that he has been very fair to President Trump throughout this process, and his decision to delay the sentencing is not some sort of gift to President Trump, although it does benefit him. In reality, the case has so many legal hurdles to still be adjudicated that there was no possible way the sentencing could proceed. Even DA Bragg's office essentially agreed with that, because if he had proceeded with that before ruling on how the Supreme Court's immunity decision impacted that case, it would have been reversed immediately.
Well, you hit on it. I mean, I think the decision had less to do with his concerns about the election coming up than it did with the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity. Isn't that true?
That's exactly right. The immunity decision essentially says that certain evidence and certain acts cannot be used in a prosecution of a former president. Now, when that case was tried, that immunity decision had not come down yet. So Judge Merchan now has to do an analysis of whether this case can even stand. And there's a good argument, I think, that the case could be reversed in total because there was testimony that was taken, particularly from Hope Hicks, and potentially some other evidence that was admitted that tainted the entire proceeding. So the reality is that this case needs a lot of appellate review, probably including the Supreme Court's own analysis, before it could even possibly continue if it's not reversed entirely.
And by the way, Hope Hicks' testimony, not only did she make it, and stuff that was happening in the Oval Office, which Supreme Court suggested might be immune from even being brought up in a courtroom in any case, but the prosecution making their final points in the case emphasized what was happening in the Oval Office. So that seems to directly conflict with the Supreme Court ruling, right?
Well, there are a significant amount of concerns about what went on in that case. And there's other significantly reversible error that occurred. But you're right. In terms of the immunity decision, we do not know exactly how that will be interpreted by the higher appellate courts and whether these cases can even stand at all if there was impermissible evidence that was admitted, or whether they can say that the outcome would have been the same without that evidence in the first place. That's highly dubious to me. I think that the proceedings are irreparably tainted, and this case probably will be reversed entirely on appeal once it gets through that process, even just on that basis.
All right. Well, meanwhile, there's another case that's been in the news.
So again, ladies and gentlemen, we should talk about this every single day till November. Maybe we will. Documents case, done. Illegally, the special counsel was illegally created. Oh, you don't like the judge's opinion? Well, are you against democracy? The Georgia case, dismantled, cash payments, a whole bunch of other things. Again, the immunity case allows Trump to speak to anyone he wants to. The Supreme Court has allowed Trump and Biden and potentially Harris, although it's like, I think, a 95% chance Trump wins. Any president can speak to, and even if you think he's pressuring people, illegally pressuring people, he's allowed to speak to somebody. You can look at like old audio tapes of John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Nixon, Reagan. Presidents lead the country. Yeah, they pressure people to do either a good job or to implement a certain policy objective. It's called politics. Okay, like I said, Democrats pressure people all the time. Just ask Bernie Sanders. They do more than that. They actually overtly cheat their own candidates. I mean, Biden won his primary, so I still don't understand that. I still don't. Oh, pressuring. Biden couldn't withstand 3 weeks of absolutely apoplectic negative media. Finally, insulting him. I shouldn't say finally, but insulting him, demeaning him. I mean, acting in a way that if they had acted like that, if a conservative had acted like that prior to the end of the primary, oh my God, they'd be like this mean, horrible, cruel person with cruelty. I've heard that before. It's just so cruel. Nobody, no political side is more cruel than the adversaries or the people or the wonderful morally superior going after Trump. Disowning friends and family, by the way. What kind of person do you have to be? Just asking you, what kind of person do you have to be to actually disown a friend or a family member because they voted for Trump? Because they want a great economy and a great foreign policy, my God almighty. So, documents case done. Documents case done. Georgia case dismantled. DC case, immunity victory completely obliterates that. And then you have the hush money, the one thing that could have got Trump. The one thing that could have got Trump. The one thing that they could have gotten Trump on. Okay? The one thing they could have gotten Trump on. And that didn't work. Why? Because the evidence they used was when he was president, again, protected by the Supreme Court and also jurisdiction. They don't have the right to, they do not have the right to convict a U.S. citizen on federal charges without the federal government involved. And the federal government was not involved.
News, and that's Hunter Biden making the quick decision after going through all this mess with the courtroom to plead guilty to these tax charges. What's the latest on that? And do you think that we will get a pardon, notwithstanding the comments?
Hunter didn't do anything in terms of, well, I mean, there could be issues with taxes, but the main issue is, of course, the laptop. Notice how they indict to protect. They've found ways to indict Trump for purely political purposes and indict Hunter for purely political purposes. They indicted Hunter not to imprison him. They indicted Hunter to shield him from the actual reality of what's in the laptop, which what 50 intel officials said, oh, yeah, it's another plot by another country. There's almost certainly bribery and graft schemes, but what they tell media, look over there, look, we're very fair, we're indicting a Democrat. Don't you see how fair we are? It's like, no, you're not indicting him on what the actual allegations from Jim Jordan, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Chuck Grassley, all of these people have actually looked at the emails. Rudy Giuliani, all these people have looked at the emails that, okay, yeah, the money issue, you're getting millions upon millions from corporations linked to foreign intel agencies. And then they're like, oh, this influencer. It's like, well, there was one accusation from Ted Cruz that said Hunter was actually typing up classified data to facilitate business deals. And some of the business deals, maybe not with the classified data, included shell companies for foreign intel agencies. But no talk about that. Oh, okay.
So the president in the past saying he wouldn't offer one.
Well, Hunter Biden faces a significant sentence, and there's almost no chance that he is not adjudged at least some amount of jail time. I don't know if the Oval Office is waiting to see whether he gets a very light sentence, and then they could allow him to serve it in some showing that this was truly a fair process here. But I would be surprised if there's not a pardon or a commutation issued if he does face a very significant jail sentence. He is not a first-time offender. That's going to be used against him significantly in the sentencing here, and he had no plea deal. So his plea of guilty was essentially just a full guilty plea with the maximum sentences available on all of those charges. So he has a lot of exposure here. President Biden's promises are not binding, and I would be surprised if he didn't commute the sentence at the very least.
And very quickly, all of the Hunter watchers out there on the conservative side are saying, shucks, because we were hoping there, in the process of discovery, there'd be all this other stuff about whether or not Joe Biden was dealing at all with his sons and brother's business. So that stuff we'll have to wait and go to congressional committees if they still want to investigate it, right?
Absolutely. I think it was pretty clear that there was going to be significantly damning and embarrassing information, at the very least, about the Biden family, about their financial dealings in particular. So that likely motivated Hunter's last-minute plea, although I don't know why it didn't come sooner. He knew that all along.
It's a good question. I'm sure the court wants to know that instead of having spent about $3 billion on it. Katie, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well, Charlie Gasparino coming up on...
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmer.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is the original Supreme Court immunity victory.
Sorry to cut you off. We're going back to Lydia. We have a ruling on immunity. Lydia, what do you got?
Yeah, Ash, this is the big one we've had all eyes on right now. We're getting this just in. Former President Donald Trump from the Supreme Court of the United States does have immunity, and it appears that the decision is limited to his official acts. Remember, a big question after the lower courts in the District of Columbia decided that the former president had no immunity across the board. Would the Supreme Court come back and say, wait a second, we can so-called split the baby? He has immunity for some acts, not others. Official acts, perhaps, not immunity for unofficial acts. Again, Ash, we're just getting this opinion in from the Supreme Court of the United States, but it does appear at this moment that former President Donald Trump, they have decided he would have immunity for official acts that he carried out. So now what would happen is that the case would be remanded back down to the lower courts. The lower court trial judges would read this opinion, and they would have to decide what happened around the events of January 6th that would qualify as an official act such that President Trump would have immunity from the prosecution brought by special counsel Jack Smith.
In 20 Our Heritage Foundation Public Finance Economy.
And ladies and gentlemen, let's just switch gears and talk about the economy. The Supreme Court and the economy. It's fun. It's awesome. It's informative. Every day, the Supreme Court and the economy. There's a lot to talk about. I want to focus on the Supreme Court and the economy for a number of reasons. It's the foundation of Trump's victory. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court, unfortunately, the stock market, I believe, is going to collapse. There'll be a market stock crash. Unfortunately, I wrote about that in the Federalist. I've been saying this for about a year and a half, 2 years. And let's listen.
Economist E.J. Antoni. E.J., I just got to begin with Janet Yellen's comments about the labor market being quite healthy, the U.S. economy on a solid path to a soft landing. What do you think?
Why are we talking about an economic stock market landing? What's this soft market landing? What does this even mean, these euphemisms, these public relations terms? In a good economy, you don't need a soft market landing. By the way, we had a recession in 2022. It was two months of negative growth.
Oh, Charles, spoken like a true elitist as usual with Janet Yellen. Let's not forget this is the woman who made the gaffe about grocery prices and claimed that she did her own grocery shopping, and then they had to stage a photo op where she was picking up her own fresh direct order, walking through the parking lot. Look, everything she says and does at this point is an absolute joke. She is completely disconnected from the common man. She has no idea that American families are paying over $300 billion in interest on credit cards right now, for example. And even when she actually has the data.
We have record high credit card debt. Say that again. Record high credit card debt. We didn't have this credit card debt before they shut down the U.S. economy. Why did Democrats push to shut down the U.S. economy? There was a choice. Why? What about the repercussions, the lives? Thank God, let's say most Americans survived. Let's say a good percentage of Americans still prospered. What percentage of Americans unfortunately had their lives ruined. Okay? Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. You shut down economic activity. You postponed potentially the dreams of countless people. You didn't have to do that. Oh, people were perishing. Yeah, unfortunately, terrible. It was terrible. What was the age? The condition? Like, you aggregate statistics, you can slice and dice and completely eviscerate the overall theme. Well, we had to. You didn't have to do anything. A big part of it was a political component. You wanted to destroy Trump's last year in office. And eventually you decided to destroy lives. Homicides went up through the roof in many Democratic-run cities where there's very strict Second Amendment laws. But anyway, let's get
in front of her. She likes to ignore the negative things because of her own political bias. Let's just put it that way.
So everyone says Nick Timiraos of the Journal sort of conveys the Fed's insight. That job is the Fed whisperer, right? So Friday evening he wrote a piece and he talked about the jobs report wasn't bad enough to seal a 50 basis point cut, but wasn't good enough to rule it out. Where do you think the Fed? Well, two things. Where do you think the Fed's going to go? Where do you think the Fed should go?
Well, I think we're probably at this point just going to get a series of quarter percentage point cuts. The one problem with the Fed going for a supersized rate cut right now is something you talked about with Peter St.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the chat, let me ask you this question, okay? You probably know more about economics than I do watching. What happens when they cut rates? Let's say 50 basis points. What do you think happens? 75 basis points. A full percent. What do you think happens? Well, the market could be petrified and actually tank. Or people say, sweet, this is awesome. We'll put more money in the market. We'll put more money in the stock market. Yay! And it inflates into a bigger bubble. Then what happens? Inflation goes up, but then what happens? The market collapse is much worse. So it's the equivalent of buying an internet startup in 2000. It's the equivalent of buying a mortgage company in 2007 or early 2008. But anyway, let's continue.
Last week that could really spook markets and make investors think that things are much worse than they are. In terms of what they should be doing, look, I mean, what has the Fed done in the past? For example, under the Trump administration, when we still had relatively similar job growth and we had an economy growing at about what it is right now, an annualized 3% rate, they weren't cutting interest rates, they were hiking them, and they were selling off the balance sheet at a pretty good clip. And today, the fact that we are having a totally different conversation, I think politics is what's behind that.
Very, very, very interesting. You put out some amazing work, and a couple of things that caught my eye was the employment level. 7 million jobs short. If you look at that pre-pandemic trend line, reversion to the mean, whatever you want to call it.
So let me ask you this, ladies and gentlemen. The job numbers are terrible. Jobs are dwindling. What happens to the stock market when corporate profits are at record highs, but job numbers are slowing down and dwindling? And inflation still goes up. And energy, by the way, oil is going up. What happens when oil goes up?
7 million. I mean, how can we fix something like that?
Well, Charles, I think we need to pay attention to what's really broken in this labor market. That has to do with all of the disincentives that we have created around working. Some of those are direct disincentives, such as marginal tax rates or regulatory burdens paid by both employers and employees. But then there are also, you could call them hidden costs. In other words, we have created alternatives for people to working. Under the Biden-Harris administration, for example, we have expanded not only how much you can get living on welfare, but also we've changed the rules to expand who is eligible for all of those different programs. Just in one of the bedroom communities here in D.C., Charles, as an example, a family can get rental assistance of almost $30,000 a year.
EJ, when the bridge collapsed, when that ship ran into the bridge in Baltimore, And those folks who were working on that bridge tragically lost their lives. They were all from different countries. I'm not sure if they were here legally or not. But it's amazing how many people live in Baltimore, to your point, who are unemployed, able-bodied men, strong men, and because they don't have to. And, a lot of people are upset the fact that even this last month, again, you put out a great piece, a chart showing that the jobs are going to foreign-born workers while U.S.-born workers either losing jobs or not getting them in the first place. And this.
The real estate market is impacted by Democratic Party immigration policies, or lack thereof. Then they say, well, we passed a bill. It's like, yeah, just because you offered a solution that is a solution devised by liberal policy objectives, or Democrats offer a liberal vision for a contentious topic like immigration and say, well, you didn't accept it, so, my goodness, you obviously don't want. It's like, no, that's called politics. Why should they accept your version of a solution when you helped create the problem? And your solution doesn't even address the underlying causes of these problems. So it's like they caused the problem. Oh, Inflation Reduction Act, that didn't help. The Fed didn't even lower interest rates. Okay, the Fed didn't even lower interest rates because they were afraid to do so. They were afraid to do so because they were afraid to lower interest rates because they knew that inflation would go up. They raised interest rates because inflation was at 9%. Then they say, we tackled inflation. No, you didn't. You raised interest rates. Now it's double for a mortgage. Now it's expensive for a car loan. Now the interest rates for credit card debt are higher. You did nothing to help anyone. This was all your mismanagement. And then, anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. I will be back tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. I should have a live stream by around 4 p.m. and then one at like 10 p.m. God bless you all. Thank you, everybody. Paul Bartlett in Australia, thank you. To my viewers around the world, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, every single day, ladies and gentlemen, is a countdown to November. November 5th. It's going to be a beautiful day. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, 11th, and 12th, and then we'll find out that Trump won on the 13th or 14th. Anyway, I'm kind of joking, but not really. Anyway, hit